This is a review of the lesson structure. Ideally, this packet is used in one-to-one with students, but it lends itself well to small groups and also independent work if you're doing intervention in a classroom. You can break it up as any way you'd like, but when I do one-to-one, I break it up 2 times a week. I break the packet up into 2 different sessions. In each session, you get listening practice, sound review, vocab practice, nonsense word reading, and nonsense word spelling. But it's really flexible, so feel free to make it your own. Here are the key concepts. Introduced in this module are open syllables, are controlled syllables, consonant LE syllables, prefixes, suffixes, root words, and the schwa. Skills practice, we continue building on skills from modules 1 and 2, 3-syllable words, and identifying syllable types. The goal for the student is automatic reading and spelling of words with multiple syllables. And here's a review of some of the concepts from modules 1 and 2. Um, if these are brand new to you, you should go back to modules 1 and 2, as well as the student. The student should be really proficient in these concepts as well by this point. So you need to know the difference between a blend and a digraph, how many sounds are in a word. You need to know a closed syllable ends with a consonant and the vowel makes a short sound. Short vowels. VCE syllables, that stands for vowel consonant E, also known as the magic E or silent E. The E at the end of the syllable makes the vowel say its name. And long vowels just say their names. So here are some examples of blends, some examples of digraphs, consonant digraphs. And then we get on to the new stuff, multisyllabic words and breaking them up. So a syllable is taught as a beat in the word, and each syllable contains one vowel sound. The goal for these units is flexible decoding. So using patterns to help pronounce and spell, and pronouncing the word is more important than knowing the rules. So this could violate your Orton Gillingham training or program. So just something to keep in mind as you're working. Um, in this approach, the goal is flexible decoding. So, for example, in the word table, there's really only one way to break table up into 2 syllables. It has to be table. If the student broke it up TAB, that would be tab, right? That wouldn't really work. So, however, in a really long word like deconstructed, the proper way to break up deconstructed is deconstruct ed. That keeps intact all of the root words, the prefixes, and suffixes. However, um, if a student breaks it up like this, they're still going to pronounce it correctly. Deconstructed. Okay, they're still breaking it up into closed syllables while the first one is open, which we'll get to in a minute. These packets don't replace one-to-one instruction with a certified Orton Gillingham instructor. Um, that said, if you're using them to supplement an Orton Gillingham program, you may want to really stick to those rules and feel free to say, hey, this packet says this, but that's not the way we're doing it. And continue using it as a tool, however you would like. So a new concept here is the open syllable. An open syllable ends with a vowel, and the vowel is long. So these are typically in longer words. There are some one-syllable words like hi, sky, and me. But most often, the reason I put it in this unit is because open syllables, you see them a lot as prefixes, such as by, re, d, in longer words. I also introduced the schwa. The schwa is in a multisyllabic word. Whoops, I spelled multisyllabic wrong there. And they're in an unstressed syllable. If you have trouble hearing what a stressed and unstressed syllable is, you're not alone. Trust me. You can always Google it. You can look on any sort of online dictionary or pronunciation key will tell you what's the stressed and unstressed syllable. So in English, in an unstressed syllable, we replace the vowel sound with an I or sound. We often call that a lazy sound. It does make the word really hard to spell. Such as in pencil. We don't say pencil. And we don't say lemon. We say pencil, and we say lemon, in, like with an I-N. Um, I often find that students, once they recognize that the word is lemon, they don't say lemon, at least when I work with older students. So again, as opposed to like a traditional Orton Gillingham approach, um, I don't hammer it into kids too much, right? I just sort of say like, okay, like they have the word lemon, just so that's a schwa. It does come in more. Becomes more important when you're working on spelling rules. Um, so teach it however it works best for you. But it is included in all of these packets. So if you're like, oh, just skip the schwa stuff, it may come back to haunt you later. Then again, if a kid is really struggling with it and you're really focusing on word recognition, it may not be where you want to spend your time. A new concept is the R controlled syllable. An R controlled syllable contains one of these combinations, A, E, I, O, or U, followed by an R. They're all considered one sound. So you'll find that A, R, and O, R are really easy for kids, R and or. It's the E-R-I-R-U-R. If you ask a kid how to say, I-R, they're going to go ear, usually. And U-R, they struggle with that one too. They all make the same sound, and Um, so it makes spelling really weird. But once they know that those all make the your sound, I find it really clicks for them when it comes to pronouncing words with R's in them. So simple examples are farmer, fur, and fur. Those two words are, pronounced the same, but they're different, right? The first fur is in like a fur coat. The second fur is in like a fir tree. You'll see that these packets focus a lot on, I put a lot of words next to each other where the R comes first, right? Because once the kid sees like, oh, whenever I see a vowel and an R together, I'm going to say So I want students to really differentiate that the R has to come after the vowel in order to control it. Another new concept is consonant LE syllables. So a consonant LE syllable is always I put always the second syllable. It's always the last syllable in a multisyllabic word. Sorry about that. Such as purple, bubble, and table. These are easy for older students. They tend to like fly through these. The tough thing I find is knowing when to double that middle letter. So if the first syllable is closed, you need to double that middle letter. So like in the word bubble, right? However, in the word table, you'll see that first syllable is open, it's long, so they don't have to double that middle syllable. So the unit focuses a lot on those, like knowing when to double and how to read table versus bubble. I use a lot of nonsense words, so that students get used to seeing, wow, that double letter really means that there's a closed syllable. Another new concept is etymology. This is something that you should feel free to skip if your students aren't up for it. But if you have students who like this sort of challenge or like knowing these sorts of things, I think it's really fun. So I integrate some Latin and Greek words, some concepts such as prefixes, suffix, and roots. I provide definitions, but again, you can really skip them. Um, This is something you can really work on later. There are lots of really great morphology resources out there. I didn't really feel like I needed to make my own. I really like um, yeah, I really just like a lot of stuff that's out there already. So feel free to use it to challenge. I put it in there because I think it's important and it's fun, but don't push kids who aren't ready and just focus on pronunciation. So for the phonemic awareness section of the packets, I have students focusing on syllables and sounds in multisyllabic words. So you'll see on these pages, pay attention to the top. I changed the directions, and have the student, so I say the word beside. What's the first syllable in beside? And then they would say b, right? There's a schwa in there, right? Um, and then I would say, how many sounds are in b, right? And then they'd have to say, that's a tough one. B, uh, and that would be two sounds. Okay. And then for the next one, you'd say, what's the second syllable in beside? And if your students are like mine, they'll try to rush it and they'll just try to give you the sounds. So really ask them to break apart the word. This is important. This is the next step in spelling multisyllabic words, is that they have to identify the syllables and then spell each syllable one by one, and that's tricky. I start to include syllable practice in the beginning of these units. To reinforce because especially in this unit, I introduced three different kinds of syllables. So continuing to reinforce the closed and VCE syllables and show students how they are often used in multisyllabic words and give them a lot of practice. So sometimes I include words that were from the previous unit. Sometimes I include new words that just use the syllables in that unit. So feel free to use as works best for you. I also include a lot of practice with the doubling rule. This was, in unit one mostly with closed syllables. So, like in the word hop, if you want to change it to hopped and hopping, you have to double that P. Students often mix that up with like the word hope with a single P, hoped and hoping. So in this one, I say doubling rule, but in that first one, it goes over, dropping that E when you're adding a vowel suffix. And then it talks a little bit about the second syllable. If the second syllable is stressed, it's going to be doubled. The final consonant is going to be doubled. If the second syllable is unstressed, it will not be doubled. So in yodeling, there's only one L. This is a rule in American English, not in British English, so that's a little tricky. And then for this final example, you should ignore that. I took that out because I realized that's not something we've talked about yet. Changing that Y to an I. We'll get there. So those are all of the concepts. If you listen to this and you're still not feeling very comfortable on these concepts, you'll see that they're really spelled out in detail in the packet. So there are worksheets with detailed explanations of all of these rules and concepts. So use those to help you as you're working with your students. I promise you that you'll learn as you go. And as always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me and I'd be happy to help. Thanks very much.